Story 1. A bit lighter than some. Making marshmallows from scratch was fun, and they were tasty, but my entire kitchen was sticky for days. Story 2. Went camping without a tent because I wanted to connect with nature. Nature connected back mostly through mosquitoes. Story 3. Parachuting scared me. I hated almost every second of it, but I am glad I had the experience. Story 4. My Doctor of Philosophy. I am glad I completed it to obtain the degree and realized that academia was not for me. However, that experience was very hard. Story 5. Waited all night in front of a Circuit City for Xbox 360. Glad I did it, but will not do it again. Story 6. Cliff jumping was a significant part of my experience from ages 17 to 20. I have amazing memories from that time, but there is no way I could repeat any of them with the stable life I have now. I am 25 and never could have imagined how much I would change, or how much my entire life would change, whether I wanted it to or not. Story 7. I worked 3 jobs while finishing school full-time. I barely slept, ate poorly, and was constantly exhausted, but it showed me what I am capable of when everything is on the line. I would not do it again, but I do not regret it. Story 8. Military. I enlisted at 18 to escape poverty and abuse. I did not agree with the war I served in, but my time in the military gave me the discipline, determination, and resources needed to dig myself out of hell and build a good life. I just left teaching and am working on my 3rd master's degree to become a social worker. War was horrible, but there is significantly less pain in my life now, and my future is bright. Story 9. Attempt on my life. I am glad I did it because now I know I do not want to die. Seeing my loved ones' reactions when they found me and the entire experience in the hospital was enough to deter me from ever doing that again. Story 10. Working as a crisis specialist on the suicide hotline taught me a lot. I learned effective ways to communicate with people in crisis and felt that I truly helped some individuals. However, the job was extremely stressful, and my anxiety began causing physical health problems, so I had to leave. Story 11. Visiting Auschwitz is something you need to do at some point in your life, but it is very hard-hitting to actually see the place. Seeing the nail marks on the walls of the gas chambers is something that will stay with me forever. It is a reminder of the cruel evil that humans can do to one another. Story 12. Skydiving. I get motion sickness easily, and the whole experience was nauseating once the parachute opened. The views were amazing, but I was trying very hard not to vomit while in the air. Story 13. Traveled across the Australian desert with 3 men I did not know via sand dunes, not Nullarbor. Female, 48 years old at that time. Story 14. Camped outside in line at Ticketmaster for Instinct tickets in the early 2000s. It was a fun experience and we did score floor seats. Not an experience that needs to be repeated. Story 15. Run a marathon. It is impressive to say I did it, but it was very hard. I was not a runner and agreed to do it with some friends one night after too much drinking. They held me to it. Story 16. Lysergic acid, diethylamide, ecstasy, speed, cocaine. Before fentanyl was an issue, I would never take a chance on anything not weed anymore. Too many dishonest dealers messing with quality. Story 17. Being in Times Square watching the ball drop was unforgettable. I was there when it turned 2001. Now, when I see it on television, I say, I would never, but I am glad I got to experience it once. Story 18. I am a 35-year-old lesbian who had only ever been with women. I had never had sex with a man until 3 years ago. He was a kind and considerate man who knew I was a lesbian, and this was an experiment for me. It was pleasant and consensual, exactly as I had hoped. I am glad I did it, but do not plan to do it again. Story 19. Hiring a commercial sex worker. Now that I know it is not the physical connection that I want. Sex without emotion felt boring to me. Story 20. Waiting from 7 a.m. in the blistering heat for the Sydney New Year's Eve fireworks. Worth it. What a spectacle, but never again. Story 21. Working for the famous rodent in Orlando was a great learning experience, but never again in any guest service role. My mental health was destroyed. Story 22. Roller coasters. I used to love them as a kid, but seeing how poorly maintained many are is enough to scare me away. Also, I want to protect my one remaining brain cell. Story 23. Hemorrhoidectomy completely resolved all my issues, but I hope I never have to do that again. Story 24. Does it count for things I used to do frequently but will probably never do again? If so, partying, clubbing, and heavy social drinking. I have tons of fun memories and many secondhand stories from nights I was blackout drunk. But now my hangovers feel like I am on my deathbed, and it just costs too much to justify getting actually drunk at the pub, let alone a bar or club where prices are higher. Also, I just do not like drunk people anymore. Story 25. Having been to the Trinity site, Los Alamos, and then the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum, it is a true testament to how horrific nuclear bombs are for humanity. It opened my eyes, but I would not want to go back. Story 26. Be a hardcore raider in a massively multiplayer online game, World of Warcraft. Our guild had some server firsts and I earned some very rare achievements at the time, but I completely burned out. The thought of coming home from work and grinding daily quests before raid time nearly gave me a panic attack. It was fun though, and I am glad to know I could perform at that level. Truly one of the best times in my gaming career. Story 27. Going to a National Football League game. I am glad I went, but Pittsburgh is cold on Christmas. I am not into loud people, crowds, long lines, or rowdy drunks. Story 28. Bungee jumping and skydiving. Did them both and I'm done. My adventurous girlfriend had parents who were thrill seekers and did both with her family. Her dad is now paralyzed from a mountain biking accident, but it felt inevitable, so I wasn't surprised when I heard about it years later. Story 29. Riding a motorbike up a trekking hill in Nepal, where it is made for trekking, not riding. Some Nepalese locals invited me to join them, so as a tourist, I decided to give it a try. My whole backside and legs were sore because the road was very rocky and slippery. Took 4 hours of pain to finally reach the camp with amazing views. For me, it was a unique achievement, but I would never do that again. Story 30. Wedding. It was not huge by any means, but it was so much work and stress, and I am so glad I did it. However, if I were to get married again, I would do a Las Vegas or courthouse wedding. Story 31. Veterinary school was an utterly exhausting and horrible 4 years of hell, sleep deprivation, and imposter syndrome. I am glad I am on the other side now and doing the job I have wanted to do since I was a child. But if you told me I had to go back and do it a second time, I absolutely would not. Story 32. Research chemicals. I had some experiences that were probably too far out, most of them being intensely uncomfortable at times, and once ended up in the hospital after getting beaten by some police officers. I still greatly admire the work of Alexander Shulgin, not just for the ingenuity required to pioneer substances, but for having the courage to test them all himself and document it for everyone to read. I am very grateful for all the experiences now that I have a family, and it would not be appropriate to spend my time exploring the boundaries of consciousness. Story 33. Pulling an all-nighter. I am glad I did it once to experience it, but I have no desire to do so again. Story 34. Designed and built my own home with some help from friends and family and hiring some tasks out of necessity. It was an enormous amount of work, not that I did not know it would be, but now, 12 years later, I do not think I could do it again while working full-time. The good part is there is a great deal of gratification, and we were able to spend the saved labor money on better materials and many features that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars if purchased from a turnkey builder. The house is highly insulated, heats efficiently, and is extremely comfortable and quiet. It also looks very sharp, if I do say so myself. Story 35. Camping in the middle of the desert, I ended up cooking kangaroo tail, eating witchetty grubs, and sleeping without a tent. Looking back, it was really cool. At the time, though, it was absolutely terrifying. I am also not a camping person at all. By the time I got home, I gave myself some retail therapy and had multiple showers. Story 36. Getting revenge. A moment of gratification turned into a lifetime of waiting for them to get revenge on you for getting revenge on them. It psychically tied me to someone I hate forever. Do not ever get revenge. Edit. This was not simple revenge like slashing his tire. This was destroying his marriage and career. Do not do it. Story 37. I ran a security company for a couple of years in a large metropolitan city. We provided security for several hip-hop and pop artists during concerts, VIP parties, and similar events. We had promoters who booked some big names for their events, including Lil Wayne, Jay-Z, and Outkast. We worked security for a couple of events for one promoter but never received payment. After numerous letters and phone calls, I had enough. I was owed a little over $7,000 from this one client. This individual, whom I will call Mr. Fat Stacks, was very wealthy and owned several local businesses. He also had a huge ego and often talked down to everyone. I heard through a friend that Mr. Fat Stacks was in town visiting one of his businesses. I took two of my biggest security officers and went to see him. These two men were also football players for a major college football team. Both were well over 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighed around 300 pounds of muscle. The scene was like something out of a movie. We were greeted at the door and told Mr. Fat Stacks was not in. That did not stop us from walking to the back, where Mr. Fat Stacks abruptly hung up the phone as he entered. I politely explained to Mr. Fat Stacks that I had followed all the proper channels but was still owed a large sum of money. I asked if he had any suggestions on how we could resolve this. It took less than 24 hours before we were paid in full. The next day, I received a phone call from someone warning that I would not get away with that again. I did not really care because we got paid. I would definitely do it again. Story 38. LSD. Dropped acid at a Fish concert. Bought it from some random guy behind me. Had the time of my life. But what I really do not want to deal with again is the teeth grinding. I could not stop, and my jaw was very sore for the next few days. Story 39. Getting my certified public accountant license and taking those exams. Crucial for my career, but I am so glad I never need to go through that twice. Story 40. Ayahuasca was the most intense experience of my life. I am glad I did it and happy with what I learned. However, I will never do it again. Story 41. Climb Mount St. Helens. It is not a true climb, at least not on the snow-free early October when I went a few years back, so it is more like an arduous hike, but I cannot emphasize arduous enough. There is no shade, no windbreaks, and it is all boulders followed by ash. The boulder climb is extensive, but when you get to the ash field, the end is right there. However, it takes forever. For every 2 steps forward, you slide back 1. It did not help that I did not prepare or train at all and had not been seriously hiking in well over a year, so it was a long day. But the boyfriend at the time, an actual mountain climber, wanted to do it, so we did. I am glad I did. I did a very Pacific Northwest thing. It taught me I never want to learn how to climb, which I was wondering about. The view was mixed. There was a fire a few miles away, so the whole west side was smoky, unfortunately. But to the east, there was a good view. Absolutely never doing that or anything like that again. Not for me. Story 42. Oh yeah. It was a trip to nowhere with a friend and backpacks on my shoulders. Hitchhiking without a penny in my pocket. Without the slightest idea of an overnight stay. Just a map on your phone and a crazy what if. We hitchhiked cars. Shared a pack of cookies for dinner. And one day found shelter with a kind old lady in a godforsaken village. Fear, delight, filth, and absolute freedom were all mixed up in this unforgettable adventure. That was the first time I felt truly alive. Now, with the burden of responsibility and worries, I would not dare to do such a thing. But then, it was like seeing yourself from the outside, more daring and reckless. Probably never again. But I don't regret for a second that I took the risk then. Story 43. Going on a hot air balloon ride. I did not want to do it, but my boss forced the whole team. He even made those with fear of heights come since he paid in advance. Story 44. I competed at Cake International. My cake looked great and received many compliments, but it was just too much work. It is really more for professionals to showcase their work and attract more business. I was doing it just for fun. I learned some new skills, but I also got a 3rd-degree burn. Story 45. Being in a polyamorous relationship, I feel completely broken inside now and my self-esteem is shattered. but good lord, the sex was worth it. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, truly. Story 46. Mushrooms. I love the experiences, but now that I am about to be a parent, I feel it is not worth the risk anymore. Story 47. A 130-kilometer cycling trip with my ex-girlfriend from our home to her parents' house. Including breaks, it took around 11 hours. Our bikes were just regular city bikes with 3 gears only, and we took it easy. Our bottoms were pretty sore at the end. The funny thing was that we both agreed for such a long trip we needed to pack lightly, and I barely took anything with me: water, food, and some necessities. However, when we were close to the end, about 10 kilometers away, my girlfriend asked me to carry her backpack too because she was exhausted. I took the bag, and it was much heavier than mine. I looked inside and saw she had packed books, 5 shampoos and conditioners, extra shoes, and a whole set of clothes. I thought, what the hell? I was both angry and amused, and kept suggesting we take a break so I could read some of her book aloud while she washed her hair. At least an extra 10 kilograms in her bag. Just useless weight. It's not like her parents wouldn't have had any of the things she brought. I'm glad I did the trip, but never going to do it again for many reasons. Story 48. Various close calls on the road. I learned a lot about what not to do as a teenager with a driver's license, and I am lucky I got to learn those lessons without having to get into an actual accident. Story 49. Visiting Tijuana was eye-opening and heartbreaking at the same time. I did not feel safe for a single second while being there. Story 50. College. I got my bachelor's degree. It was all right, I guess. COVID-19 happened during that time, so it was not the best. Many of my friends went back for their master's degrees, but I decided not to. I chose a different career path to avoid more school because I just cannot live like that ever again. Story 51. I did Airbnb experiences where you go paddleboarding in the ocean or in a lagoon. I had never gone paddleboarding and wanted to try it out. I should add that I have great balance, strong legs, and know how to swim, but I am overweight. Getting up and down on the paddleboard is generally not hard, but stepping on certain parts of the board to maintain balance is difficult when you are overweight. The operator chose a lagoon that day, which is apparently infested with crocodiles. I was terrified the entire time that I would fall in. Why did I not just decline? I am awkward and have a very hard time saying, no, I am not comfortable with that. Story 52. Hiking through the Rocky Mountains for a month. I am extremely proud of myself, but it was probably the hardest thing I have ever done. It was suffering from sunrise to sunset. I made a mistake by going cheap and accidentally getting a kid's sleeping bag that only went up to my waist because I was being frugal. It was around 100 degrees during the day and dropped to 30 at night. I had to use all my clothes and my rubber rain poncho to stay alive. I was very miserable. I definitely grabbed the wrong pair of shoes. We had to return on our first expedition so I could get new shoes. My ankles were literally bleeding. The walk back was extremely painful. My friend and I got lost even though we had a satellite GPS because he wanted to go off-trail to visit a lake. We had to climb over half a mile of boulders on the side of the mountain because we knew the trail was at the bottom of the canyon. It was exhausting to lift my 70-pound pack over every single boulder repeatedly. However, I saw some of the most amazing sights I will probably ever see in my life. Fields of flowers in all colors. I kept some rocks that I call meat rocks because they look like something from the game Zelda that the Gorons would eat. On one of my hikes, we climbed to the top of a mountain where we were staying, and our camp looked like ants from that height. My friend's brother was a park ranger, so he took us to an aspen forest. It was incredible to see an entire forest that was literally one organism. It reminded me of the first Mortal Kombat movie where Johnny Cage fights Scorpion. If you do not know about aspens, they grow through their roots, so technically they are just one tree made of thousands of trees. It really amazed me. I smoked weed with a guy named Dan on top of a mountain in Waterton Canyon, which is where Denver gets all its water. I watched 2 storms come over the tops of 2 sets of mountains and collide. I was very surprised. I don't know if you have ever smoked weed at high elevation, but it hits much harder. The same is true with alcohol. We camped on the side of the mountain for a few days. I finished reading Strangers in a Strange Land on a beautiful day while staring at a mountain. I literally wept with happiness. As we came down, a man pulled over and gave us a ride. Shout out to Jesse. There was a fair in Vale where he took us. He bought us fire-pulled pork sandwiches because he just wanted us to know how good they were. Then we went to a bar and played pool until the park ranger friends showed up. We went back to the campground, and the park rangers sure know how to party. We partied hard, wrestled, and played basketball until dark. This was also during the Olympics, so we went down to a bar, ate chicken wings, and watched the games. The bartender claimed he used to be a professional water polo player. I believed him because he was very muscular and large. He told us how brutal water polo players are. They will step on your Speedo to gain extra height when trying to get the ball. I am telling this story out of order, but after the climbing over boulders, I told myself if I got out of the mountains alive, I would see my mom. I hadn't seen her in years. My friend and I took opposite routes across the country. He went to Oregon and I went home to New York. On the last night, when we got dropped off at the bus station, I said, "Dude, we should contact Jesse." That was scary. Jesse came to pick us up and bring us back to his camp. He was with a crew of electricians. He had bought a trailer and, while traveling for work, he would park it and then drive home on weekends to see his family. We partied hard and smoked a lot of weed. Then people started pulling out assault rifles. My friend and I looked at each other and thought we made a mistake and should have stayed at the bus station. They started shooting at cans attached to trees from a canyon. These guys were terrible shots. When it was our turn, my friend grew up hunting and I went to the shooting range often for fun. We destroyed all the cans. We explained we needed to get back to the bus station. Jesse said we had to stay the night, but we told him we had tickets that left in a few hours. We told him this before he picked us up. He then drove us on a dirt mountain road while drunk. It was extremely frightening. He was driving very fast in his pickup truck. There is much more to this story, but I do not want to write anymore. I apologize for the disorganized account. Rest in peace, Tony. I would have never had one of the most profound experiences of my life without you. But no, I would never do that again. Story 53. Disneyland. I had to know. I knew deep down I would hate it, but I became obsessed with the idea that you have to go to a Disney park once in your life, that it was special. I was living within driving distance of Disneyland, so I felt left out. Even my friend who grew up really poor had been to Disneyland. I watched a bunch of videos to learn about the parks. The crazy thing is I don't even like Disney that much outside of a few Pixar movies. I hated it, but it killed whatever Disney obsession had taken over my mind, and now I'm free. I can say I've been there. Story 54. Skydiving. I had zero fear throughout the entire experience. But while free falling, it calmly occurred to me that I could die. Story 55. This is going to sound strange, but I was the clingy and delusional guy in a friendship with someone I really admired. I mistook politeness and tolerance for a true connection. I am usually on the other side of situations like this and try to be as diplomatic as possible to spare the other person's feelings. Early on, I recognized that I did not want or need a true friendship at the time, nor was I ready for it. Being on the other side showed me that the kindest thing I could have done was to be honest instead of simply trying to be nice out of empathy. I am not proud that it happened, but I am glad I went through it. Story 56. Smoking salvia. It was fun for about 5 minutes of intense tripping, but I will never do it again. I was cold sweating for approximately 2 days afterward and felt generally sad for no good reason. Story 57. Joining the Navy. I do not generally recommend to young people that they do it when asked, but I think I would be dead if I did not enlist. Forget the Navy. Story 58. I had a long-distance relationship and ended up moving to Colombia with my ex, who was Colombian. It was a great experience. Sadly, the immigration bureaucracy made it very difficult for me to stay longer, so I had to return to my country after about 4 months. Unfortunately, we couldn't adjust to the distance again, and everything went downhill from there. I ended up broke, in debt, and mentally in a very bad place, but it was a beautiful experience. Story 59. Moved to another country to live with a man I had met for the first time 3 months before. It did not end well. Story 60. LSD after a multi-day, sleepless MDMA binge. My body's depleted state made whatever dose I took substantial. It was terrifying, but one of the most powerful experiences, maybe the most powerful, I have had. I smoke weed, but otherwise I do not really do drugs anymore. I definitely think psychedelics can be worth doing, but they can also take a real toll, and the memory of the nature of the experience is often fleeting. Story 61. Twilight Zone Tower of Terror at Disneyland Paris. It was an exciting ride to experience, but also the worst experience I have ever had. Story 62. Waiting in line for the Eiffel Tower was a great experience, but I would not do it again. A tip for anyone fit enough: take the stairs instead of the elevator to the middle floor. Story 63. Soon I will quit my first information technology job, which I am currently doing. I quickly realized it is not for me. I am pursuing a career change, hoping things turn out well. Story 64. Las Vegas. Went there for a concert. Spent the day walking up and down the strip. Had a great time, but feel like I saw what I wanted to see and have no need to do it again. Story 65. Having false friends, but I am glad I experienced that because now I recognize a false friend when I see one, so I can avoid trouble. Story 66. Mushrooms. It was a great, soul-expanding experience, but the whole thing lasted 8 hours and felt like 15. It is too much, and I do not think I have the patience to go through it again. Story 67. Tattoo regrets. Got one on a whim, hated it for years, but now it is a funny story. Would not get it again, but it makes me laugh. Story 68. I rode a freight train. I was pulled off at gunpoint in the middle of a cornfield in Mississippi, but flying across the Louisiana swamps with my arms stretched wide on the deck of a piggyback felt incredible. Story 69. Heroin. I insisted on trying it, but the only person I knew who used was one of my exes. I called her and said, "Hey, I want to do heroin." And she replied, "Okay, bring money." Typical. However, I didn't know she was a week out of rehabilitation, looking to pick up where she left off and using me to get her first fix back. She proceeded to inject and overdose. Her mother came out and told me I should leave, which I did as the ambulance was arriving. She survived that overdose, but I never saw her alive in person again. That was in 2014. She passed away from an overdose in January 2021. I'm sorry, Kaylee. Story 70. That time I stayed up all night just binge watching a show instead of sleeping felt awful the next day. But honestly, those episodes were worth it. Story 71. I rode a big roller coaster. I am terrified of them, and I rode because the group I was with pressured me into it. I hated it and was glad when it was over, but I am also glad I did it. Story 72. White water rafting was very fun. However, I have a daughter now and would not risk drowning in a river. Story 73. A marathon through the White Sands Missile Range. I have never been so sore, and I lost 4 of my toenails. Story 74. Seeing Rocky Horror live with a collaborative audience. Loved it, but it was too much for me at times. Story 75. Lysergic acid diethylamide. Once was enough for me. The 16-hour come-down was brutal, and I do not dream of ever doing it again. It was fun while peaking, but not so much afterward. Story 76. Grand Canyon Mule Ride. It was indescribably amazing, and we were so lucky to go. It was one of the most physically demanding experiences of my life. It is an absolutely breathtaking, brutal, and relentless 2 days. Story 77. I did 75 hard starting at the beginning of the year. Basically, it is 75 straight days of 2 workouts per day, dieting, no drinking, and a few other tasks. I did well with it. I lost 25 pounds and built a lot of muscle, but weekends were very boring, and eventually the constant exercising without rest caused some aches and pains. I was in good shape when I started, but I was in excellent shape when I finished. Still, it is a bit isolating because all you really do is work out and cook your meals. I found myself avoiding social situations, and the only things I looked forward to were eating my 1 meal a day and going to bed. It takes a lot of self-discipline, but if you do not approach it with caution, you can get seriously hurt. I cannot argue with the results though. Maybe next year I will do a dry January with a similar diet and workout schedule, but 75 days is too long. Story 78. Cutting my hair short. I looked like Dora for a bit, but as a curly-haired person, it was not easy to deal with. Story 79. Skydiving. I hate heights, but I still wanted to try it. I kept procrastinating until a couple of friends wanted to go and invited me. The guy I was strapped to lied and said we would scoot to the door and count to 3, but he scooted and never stopped, just throwing us out. I cursed him for a couple of seconds, and then it was insanely fun. It was fun. I am glad I did it, but I never want to do it again. Story 80. Jet skiing. I absolutely loved it, went at it full tilt, had an amazing time, and was peppering the organizer with questions about how much they cost to buy and maintain. However, a few hours later, when the adrenaline wore off and I really thought about how quickly and easily you could seriously injure yourself, the urge wore off. Also, as I learned later, someone else on the same stretch of water under the guidance of a qualified and experienced organizer, and in a speed-limited jet ski with proximity sensors and cutouts, still literally died the day after I had been out there by knocking himself out and falling off, which added some perspective. I have been on one since, to be fair, as it was offered, and I am an idiot. But I was more cautious about how I handled it that time and still consider it to be a high-risk activity, where it is not a question of if, but when, you will do yourself a serious injury if you ride regularly. Story 81. Climbing a mountain, Mount Whitney in California, on an off-trail route. This was back in high school when I was in really good shape and trained hard. I didn't have much skill or knowledge related to mountaineering, but I was with some experienced friends. I was essentially a glorified pack mule. It was extremely difficult. By the halfway point, every step felt like torture and I was completely exhausted. However, I made it to the top. I am very proud that I did it, but I don't see myself ever doing something that's strenuous and mentally challenging again. Story 82. Went to the National Mall for fireworks on the 4th of July in the United States. Grew up near Washington, D.C., so it was not far. It was a very cool display being right in it, and I am glad I went once. However, it was also hot, dusty, and crowded, requiring bathroom planning and grabbing a spot early enough. I just do not have it in me to do it again. I would not rain on anyone else's parade for wanting to go. But I am good now. Story 83. Molly was one of the best experiences with a drug I have ever had, but never again. For about a week afterward, I felt like my brain was stuck in second gear or something. Story 84. Hands down, doing my Master of Science was the absolute worst phase of my life, but as a 20-something professional, I am really glad I am done with it. I gained so much weight and frustration. Story 85. Donate blood. I did not do it because I was afraid. I knew it was a good thing to do, so I spent 45 minutes in terror to donate. I then passed out. I still know it is a good thing, but I was basically told I probably should not anymore. I still count it as facing a fear, and the blood ended up going to a hospital to help someone. So that is good. Story 86. Several years ago, I loaded a bunch of camping gear onto my bicycle and spent the better part of the next 7 months riding 5,300 miles or 8,500 kilometers around the western United States solo. From my home in Wisconsin, I rode out to Seattle and then down the Pacific coast. I often describe it as the greatest thing I never want to do again. 5 years later, when I look at a map of the country, I am still left in a moment of awe over the fact that I actually crossed most of that on a bicycle. But cycling across the plains of South Dakota, Wyoming, and western Minnesota was at times one of the hardest things I have ever done, just as much mentally as it was physically. Traveling at the pace of a bicycle gave me plenty of time to find the subtle beauty of the plains lost at the speed of a car or airplane, and so South Dakota and Wyoming came to hold a special place in my heart. Even so, my next bikepacking adventures will see me flying over the plains to focus on cycling the more dramatic scenery. Story 87. Drugs. My entire teenage years were spent surrounded by heavy drug users taking a variety of substances. I tried many things and had a lot of fun, but as you get older, you begin to see the dark side. I learned that the only good story with a good ending involving drugs is the one where you stop. Story 88. I was going to post this anonymously, but I realized I am not ashamed of it and I do not really care. Gangbang. It was exciting and fun, but also incredibly overwhelming and overstimulating. I was tired for days afterwards. Story 89. Rode my motorcycle from Chicago to Tampa in the wintertime. The only thing that kept me going was repeating in my head, I am going south. It will warm up soon. I am going south. It will warm up soon. Took 3 days. Story 90. Having a home birth was a unique experience, but many things can go wrong. I also paid for my midwife out of pocket, even though the birth could have been covered fully by insurance. Story 91. Drinking a whole can of Four Loko and 2 shots of tequila in about an hour and 20 minutes as a lightweight. Blacked out for 6 hours and do not remember how I got home. I do not drink more than 2 to 3 drinks now. I make sure I take my time. That one experience was enough to make me swear off alcohol for a while, but now I trust myself to not drink over my limits. Never again. Story 92. 10 days camping in Africa. Glad I did it. Saw amazing things. Never again. My back still hurts thinking about it. Story 93. I am a huge Borussia Dortmund fan. When I got the opportunity to attend a match on Die Gelb-Wand, it was fantastic. The whole experience was phenomenal. However, I am somewhat claustrophobic. People are very close together, invading your personal space with little room to move. You are literally stuck. Once was enough for me. Story 94. Dating a gender-fluid person not because the experience was bad, but because I realized I am just straight up attracted to guys. Story 95. Caring for my abusive father as he died of leukemia. I do not regret it, but I definitely cannot do that for my mother. Story 96. Had exactly 1 puff of cigarette in middle school and decided not to continue. Had exactly 1 puff of marijuana in college and decided not to continue. Story 97. Getting pierced. I'm really afraid of needles but recently had an opportunity to pierce my ears, so I did it. 2 lobe piercings on each side. The piercer was amazing and it didn't hurt much, but I felt the needle going through my skin, which did not feel nice. I also held my friend's hand because I needed a little encouragement. I love my piercings but never again. Never say never. I might want 2 more for triple lobe piercings, but that won't be anytime soon. Story 98. Went swimming with sharks. Looking back, I am glad I was convinced by my family to try, but being only about 10 feet above live sharks is terrifying, especially when you are told they stay at the bottom of the pool, but halfway through, one starts swimming up directly below you. Story 99. Fish tour. Taking off for a month every summer to drive around the country with friends going to every show was a ton of fun in the 1990s. Now it sounds exhausting. Story 100. Ride on a catamaran was beautiful and great. We docked and that night on the same path one capsized. Story 101. Scuba diving was beautiful. I did a number of dives over a 3-year period, but I have scratched that itch. I am thrilled that I did it, but it was enough. Story 102. Scuba diving. I have done it twice and am glad I did. The equalization on the way down and the discomfort for days afterward are not worth it. One big reason I am hesitant to try skydiving is that equalization issue. Sometimes it bothers me while driving up hills or on airplane flights. Story 103. Finally trying mushrooms. What a night that was. Actually, I could definitely see myself trying it again. Story 104. Getting in a shouting match with my boss in front of customers. This was not my finest moment, but I needed to stand up for myself in a workplace that did not care about its staff. I worked at a small local restaurant in my area. There were a couple of older women who worked there, and the majority of the rest were high school students having their first jobs, like me. One of the older women was absolutely difficult. I did not know what her issue was, but I knew the only reason she was never fired was that she owed the boss so much money that the boss knew if she fired her, she would never see that money again. This woman liked to steal tips when it was time to do tip outs among the front of house staff. She would divide the money and give herself way more than the rest of us. We caught her many times, yet she kept doing it and never got fired. She always had an issue with us girls from high school for some reason, so she frequently picked fights with us even though she was a grown woman. Once she asked me for a ride home. I of course said yes, but she neglected to tell me how far she lived. I was driving my side-by-side vehicle that goes 20 kilometers per hour on a good day. While I was driving her, she asked to borrow $15 from me, which was sitting right beside me because I had just been paid. I was 14. She was at least 60. One day, I arrived for work, and it was immediately busy, unlike her day shift where it was not busy at all. I started my work and looked at the line. Every single thing was empty. There were no cut tomatoes, no cut pickles, sauce bottles were empty, no dips made, and much more. I thought she must have been busy until my coworker told me that this woman had bragged about how she was getting back at us girls by leaving everything empty. The night before, a few things were left empty, but not by me or the other person working that day. I did not know why she left everything empty for us. I had to scramble with people coming in and calls for orders that I had to answer while cutting and preparing the food, making it and serving it. It was an awful place to work. I did 5 jobs in one and barely got paid. After the dinner rush, I went to my boss and asked to talk for a minute. She came out of the kitchen into the front, in front of the dining room where customers were sitting. A very nosy customer was present. I told my boss that the woman had left everything empty and what my coworker had said about her doing it on purpose. However, my boss said, "I did not see it, so I don't believe it." I said, "What? After everything this woman does, you are saying that, and nothing is going to happen." Things got heated. I ended up saying, "Well then, if that is how it is here, I do not want to work here anymore." She said, "Then leave." I said, "All right," dropped what I was doing, and left. I later received a text from my boss asking me to come back. She said she normally did not rehire people who quit and left their shifts, but she liked me. "No, you said leave, so I left." I would have stayed for my 2 weeks, but whatever. I came back to work there until the place closed down due to awful management, which is a whole other story. That customer ended up telling the woman everything I said to my boss, and the next week, the woman yelled at me. That was fun. I have many crazy stories from that place, and that is not even the beginning. From moldy food to selling liquor and cigarettes completely against any laws, I do not know how that place ever got certified by the health department. Story 105. I lived in New York for 3 years for a job and greatly enjoyed it. I met my wife there and love visiting, but I never want to live there again. Story 106. This is pretty lame compared to some of these, but I did a 6-month vegan challenge and made this amazing Alfredo sauce with eggplant. It tasted really good, but it took an hour and a half just to prepare it, not including cooking time. Also, I will never go vegan again, but I would not say I am glad I did it. Story 107. Drove the back half of the road to Hana in Maui with my husband on our honeymoon. We had no idea what we were in for and it was very scary, but it was also beautiful and unforgettable. Story 108. I was angry at my sister. I thought of smashing her leg with the racket, but I controlled my anger and hit the ground instead. Story 109. Living and working in ski resorts was an incredible experience. I did it in several countries, and it was the best experience. Now, I am moving on to bigger and better opportunities. Story 110. Got very high and watched Skinamarink in a pitch-black room. I have never been so viscerally terrified in my life. I got the horror adrenaline rush I am always chasing, but I also could not go into dark rooms for about a year. Story 111. I cannot swim, not for the life of me, but I love the water so dearly. One day, I went on a boating trip with my sister in the Caribbean. For some reason, the captains of our small shuttle decided we needed to go out into the middle of the ocean to cross onto the party boat. I could not swim. We were not allowed to take life jackets, and I did not have my sea legs. Even so, I pushed myself. I was staring at the small plank as the ocean water lapped over it. The crew helped me over, but I immediately slipped going down the stairs and fell into a man nearby. I scurried away very fast. I am still proud of myself for facing my fear of the water, and I had a wonderful time. But after a fall like that, never again. Story 112. Exploring caves. Did a long 2-hour hike through a cave in Thailand nicknamed That Shit Cave, and had a guided meditation in complete darkness at one point. Absolutely a cool experience, but I think I am good. Story 113. Worked nearly full-time nights on the ambulance while going through nursing school during the COVID-19 pandemic. I genuinely did not have a sleep schedule when I graduated because I would go to clinicals 45 minutes away at 6:30 in the morning and get home at 3 p.m. for my 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. night shift on the ambulance. The experience I gained from working emergency medical services was well worth it, though. Story 114. I rode 206 miles on my bicycle with no real distance training. It was the fully supported Seattle to Portland ride, and there are people who do it annually. I had blisters on my buttocks and my hands did not work properly by the end of the first day, which included 200-mile rides. It took weeks of therapy to get them functioning again. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.